Alright everyone, the other day of course Trump gave his Mount Rushmore speech with fireworks and America First and stuff, and it was immediately, there were two angles of attack that were used by the legacy media. The first was that it was dark and divisive. They've used this terminology before, and it literally never applies to something that a rational average individual would find divisive or dark and foreboding. And the other one was that it was a celebration of the erasing of Native Americans. Like, there are groups saying, oh, here's the land stolen from the native people since 1776. Well, none was. It was conquered. That was the 1700s and the 1800s. Not the modern times, didn't involve people alive today, involved groups that never even had solid tribal holdings. These people fought over their borders constantly. They were conquering one another for thousands of years before there was a single European on the continent. So you'll spare me the crocodile tears over things that happened centuries ago. That being said, ABC, CNN, and a whole bunch of others called it dark and divisive, talking about, well, Trump is stoking up racial tension again. And it was funny because this morning one of the things pinned there on Twitter was a Washington Post piece talking about Biden offers a hopeful alternative to Trump's divisive 4th of July speech. And I'm thinking to myself, looking through the speech, what exactly is divisive here? A celebration of the founding of the United States? I can understand why BLM would find that divisive because they hate the United States. Talking about American togetherness, Biden echoes that sentiment constantly. The only difference is that Biden thinks that the way you achieve togetherness is to elect him and follow his plans. Trump thinks that the way to have togetherness is to re-elect him and follow his plans. There's really no difference between the two. I could point you to a million Biden statements on Twitter, especially over the last few months, where he's basically said similar things. This harkens back to 2016, when I began to notice the supposedly hateful, divisive, bigoted rhetoric of Trump's immigration policy. Oh my God, he wants to build a wall. He said that some people coming over were traffickers and drug dealers. He's a terrible person. Oh my God, what a bigot. He's going to destroy America. I noticed that if you looked at some of his speeches, it looked almost like he had lifted parts of Obama and Bush speeches, mashed them together and released them, and was probably smirking the whole time when they reported on it, because they were essentially calling out the Bush-Obama era. Because the same things were said. The only difference is, of course, there was no actual attempt to build a coherent border defense. Now you do have that. I still find it funny when people claim that it's not a wall because you can see through it. It's not the medieval era anymore. It's not the 1300s. We have better engineering capabilities now to deal with the sort of things that you actually have to deal with at the southern border. Battering rams and catapults, generally not a thing down there. There aren't a lot of trebuchet rolling around in northern Mexico. You can probably sleep soundly at night knowing that war elephants aren't being marched up from the Yucatan. Not a problem. It's a barrier against small vehicles and humans, basically. And it's not even to stop somebody who's dedicated towards coming in. Oh, they'll be able to. They'll be able to surmount it no matter what form it takes. And I think Trump realized that and said, well, at the very least, our border agents can see what's on the other side, preferably before it's at the wall. That gives them more time to respond with a wall to slow them down enough to be apprehended. It's the whole fucking point. It's easier to repair. You can repair that segment of wall if you don't have to chase some cocaine dealer around for 2 years. It's a lot cheaper in the end. Anyway, I'm looking at his speech. Please, somebody, on the left even, point out to me a single divisive statement that he makes. America first, American togetherness, yeah, here's our founders and stuff. The only thing that they could find divisive is like Teddy Roosevelt was behind him, and oh my God, he was a colonialist. How dare he celebrate this person we're trying to de-person? Because that's really what it's about now, isn't it? He's sitting in front of a monument to 4 particularly great American presidents, and these people have been labeled problematic, including, oddly enough, Abraham Lincoln himself at this point, by elements of the far left. And they want to pretend that there's some sort of massive mandate for the left to move the American social paradigm towards their vision of history. But there's not. The vast majority of Americans support the concept of Mount Rushmore. The fact that it happens to be built on native land is irrelevant because it's not native land. It's American land. Shouldn't, by the way, the reservations hold the so-called Native American population back and are run in a massively corrupt fashion anyway. They should be abolished altogether. They shouldn't exist at all. I think that it's just a modern-day minstrel show myself. Be American. You don't need to worry about it. Look, pay these people off, give them huge sums of money, because they currently do legally hold the land, and let them buy private land and be part of society. They can make their own little ethnic community if they want. But there shouldn't be a reservation system. There should be a normal school system, because the schools there are corrupt, and there's a lot of child abuse, unfortunately, and then there's no drug rehab program, so that becomes a problem. It's a bunch of bullshit. If anything's divisive, it's the concept of attempting to eliminate the standard concept of Americanism in favor of hyphenated Americanism for grievance politics purposes, number one, and billionaires, by the way, number two, using the anger of masses who believe that sort of ethos, that sort of principle, for political purposes, and even more for economic ones. Because it's gotten to the point where companies at this point, they're not even dedicated towards making a better product. They're only dedicated towards making a better ad campaign by pretending to be bigger social justice warriors than the competitor. It's like Coca-Cola's going to put up a Black Lives Matter sticker, and Pepsi's going to say, well, shit, we can't let that happen, so they put up 2 Black Lives Matter sticker. And then you have a little rainbow flag at the bottom that Coca-Cola puts on theirs, and then Pepsi puts the communist flag on theirs and says, we support Antifa, and it just sort of bounces back and forth, and they're running themselves into a purity spiral from which there's no realistic return, by the way. There's nothing divisive in the Trump speech. For the most part, there's nothing divisive in any of the speeches that he's made, unless you dislike the concept of Americanism, or unless you engage in bigotry towards groups that it is currently, in this paradigm, accepted by the left to be bigoted towards. Maleness, whiteness, straightness, insofar as the straight identity of any sort, which is kind of meaningless. Christianity to an extent, although that battle has sort of lost out because they like the Pope, to some extent. When the Pope talks about condoms or mercy and stuff, like when he talks about how borders are bad and you should build bridges instead, they cheer. The current Pope is a social media figure. He's very, very good at branding the Catholic Church to make it look like they've gotten past the 1600s. They haven't, but, you know, the superstition's still there, but it's less vicious now. Protestant churches need to catch up. They're going to compete too. They're going to compete to be the church of wokeness at some point. It's going to be very funny to see them destroy one another as well. But these are Dreg networks. Name something divisive here. Being American is not a divisive thing. If anything, it's fusing multiple what would be separate ethnicities and cultures together into a new, more malleable form, number one, but a more stable, expansive one, number two. That was the whole founding goal of the United States. It wasn't founded by a homogenous network of people from one country. There was influence from multiple countries. Yeah, they were all white Anglo-Saxon Protestant after a fashion. The early United States, though, fused Irish influence in very early, although it's really in the mid-1800s that you get the influx there. There was certainly influence from the Germanic region. There was Scandinavian influence, and these groups of people had slaughtered each other for 1,000 years. All of a sudden, they pulled together and said, well, there's all this extra land and stuff. We don't need to fight. Hell, it's going to take us 2 centuries just to settle the fucking area. They didn't even know half the continent existed. They didn't know it was west of the Mississippi for quite some time. They didn't feel the need to fight quite so much in that particular era. Then, of course, by the antebellum period, things are getting filled in and people start fighting over industry. It became a big problem. There's nothing divisive in his speech, though, saying America first. America first isn't divisive. It was funny. People reacted with all countries matter hashtag on Twitter, apparently astroturfed by TikTok fans. Yeah, of course. And the United States is a nation. It matters. Its identity matters. Its success matters, to more than just the United States, by the way, to most of the Western world. And if you don't like that, then it's fine. You have your own culture. You know, Italians can be proud of Italy and its accomplishments. Spaniards can be proud of Spain and its accomplishments. And Americans can be proud of America. And there's nothing wrong with that. Our history is no more or less warmongering than any other country anyway. The difference is that we won consistently enough to become very, very powerful. And that has sparked, in some cases, unfortunately, jealousy and diplomatic quarrels with other countries that don't like the fact that the United States is the monopolar power over the Western world. And they don't like this. Apparently they would rather adopt communism and have China conduct imperialism and take their countries over explicitly. Which is what, by the way, would happen. It won't, because, you know, it's just not economically feasible. When people say the American empire is ailing, No, it's almost 200 years. It's 200 years old here. Rome fell after 200 years. Well, the United States has certainly not been an empire for 200 years. Actually, only for about 70. So get used to it for a while. That's about all. Peace out.